like faking it for the camera, you know?
Okay. Well, Josh is going skydiving next Friday. If anyone
Ooh,
wants to go
I'll be
with him
smiling then. Yeah, come skydiving on Friday.
for his birthday.
Where is it out of? Is it?
It's at Amelie Island.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There's one there and then there's one on the west side.
Yeah, Cecil Field is the one I feel like.
I think it is.
Y'all are crazy.
Yeah,
I would
it's
never
like-
jump out of a plane. A perfectly good airplane again.
Yes.
Again.
I thought you did that once. Not, yeah, no, never again.
I see you here.
Huh?
I see you here.
Barely. All right, Chris.
All right.
Take the floor.
Sure.
Sorry that there's several people. Trey will probably stumble in here late. Sorry, Trey.
It's all good. This is just going to be super casual anyway. I threw this together very quickly in like a couple hours, so there's a good chance we'll go off script a little bit, but I'll send this out. Either I'll get your emails or Kira can send it out or whatever. So if you guys are thinking about taking notes or whatever, focus more on stuff I say versus what's written down, because you can get this.
Yes, take notes, because this is going to basically, we'll give them a brief overview of, because I just put guest speaker. I didn't really tell them why you were here.
Yeah.
If I tell people why, what we're doing is
The
on
Emperor.
Oh,
Here we go.
there you go.
Yay.
Yeah, so brief overview. So I run, yeah, that one's kind of flickering, so I don't know if we want to shut it off. Or,
How do we shut it off?
I gotta guess the right one.
Oh, no.
The stakes are high too.
They are?
Oh.
That's okay.
No?
Is
That was
it?
it.
Oh,
Sorry.
Okay. I have no idea what's going on.
As long as we get one.
we definitely need to label them.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Getting there.
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
All right. So I moved down here like 2 years ago. We own and operate 72 units across 4 properties. We also have a 2.5 acre site under contract that we're going to be building 19 rental townhomes on. And then next week I'm actually closing on our first short-term rental deal. So I'm in the process of figuring that all out. But it's a triplex over in Murray Hill. Before I started my own thing, I worked for a company out of New York. We bought 4,000 units across 23 properties worth about $300 million. And I oversaw everything in Florida, which is like 1,000 units in town here, across 7 properties. So we had a 100 unit on the north side, 100 unit on Atlantic Boulevard, 100 unit in Orange Park, 300 unit in Arlington, a couple others loose in there. So I've been doing this for like, I don't know, 6-7 years. So definitely still learning. I've learned a ton in the last 2 years because when I moved from New York, we bought out of state and we would outsource property management and construction management and all that stuff. I just decided I was going to move down and do all that myself. So been figuring a lot out the last 2 years and kind of got things going now. I've got 3 people that work for me, one of which is my fiance, but the other 2 is a property manager and a maintenance person. And we focus on small to mid-size apartment deals that need pretty decent renovations, where a lot of times we'll got kitchens, got bathrooms, do a lot of exterior work. Some more so than others. Some are pretty easy, some are really heavy. But we focus on finding deals where they're underperforming, need a lot of work done. We can come in, renovate, increase the rents and the value, and then refinance out a bunch of money, and then hold it for cash flow for a while. All of our deals, we also raise money from investors on. So some are joint ventures with friends and family, and then some, we have people who I've just met and know who throw money in as well. But we also do the fundraising side, which I'm not really going to talk about today. It's kind of not really applicable to this stuff, but we do have investors in all of our stuff. So
Like crowdfunding?
kind of yes, but not like on a website like that. It's kind of the same thing though, where I have a database of people that are interested, and when we get a deal, we send out a blast, and there's a 50-page investment summary we put together with the property information, the business plan, our track record, a bunch of different stuff like that. So
I want those emails so I can participate.
sure. I can just send one too if you guys are curious just to see it. So
Yeah.
I'm happy to share that. I would just ask that I don't care as much about this if you guys send it to somebody, but that stuff is pretty private.
Oh,
So
yeah.
just if you guys do get it, just on your word, just
Absolutely.
don't send it around. So
Have
Here's-
you flipped any apartments in Mandarin?
no, but I live in Mandarin.
Yeah, I just saw that.
I would love to. There's just not much over there.
I
So
just
a lot
helped a friend of mine move into one over there, and it looks like they flipped the whole apartment complex.
Mm.
It's right next to that high school. Mandarin? No,
I grew up out there. So.
it's called San Jose something.
Oh, was it San Jose?
No,
Apartments.
so right now we're just focused on Jacksonville and then a little bit on Daytona and Orlando.
Okay.
Um,
Because I just got one across my desk. It's like the apartments in like Ohio.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. The problem is, we're trying to build up the property management side as well to be vertically integrated. And it's incredible. It's incredibly tougher to manage a sub 100 unit property. Because 100 units, you have a manager and a maintenance person on payroll, and that's their 9 to 5 job. So for us, I've got 2 people working for me, but it's scattered sites. So we've got 2 in Orange Park, 2 in Riverside, but we've looked at them all over. So you got to manage time and stuff. So
Oh
it's a lot
yeah,
of
that's a
fun stuff.
lot. Okay,
Um,
just curious.
Yeah. Um,
It could have been insurance.
So I wanted to start first, back it way up, because I think a lot of people, and I don't mean to overgeneralize, but especially agents, because you're in the real estate game, are like, you see everybody buying real estate, and you're like, I want to buy it, which is not wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. But a lot of people don't think about when you start to become an investor, you're putting your money to work, and there's a lot of other things besides real estate. So one thing to think about, and you can see here, but really the couple biggest things that you're going to want to think about is risk reward, right? Everybody focuses on what it can make me, but not how likely am I to lose money on this, right? So a lot of the deals that we do, we go over budget on stuff. It just happens. Luckily, we have reserves and stuff to, do that. But, shit happens and you run into it. You buy a turnkey property that's already been flipped or something that we did, there's probably a lot less. Or you buy new construction, there's probably a lot less risk. You still have some stuff, but it's a lot less risky. And especially whether you have the experience or you have the time or you have the resources or a lot of capital, you've really got to weigh that up. The problem, though, is risk is really personal and subjective. So, for example, do any of you guys, are you not from Jacksonville? Where are you from?
South Carolina.
Okay, we're in South Carolina.
Buford.
Oh,
Alright.
You would have less risk buying a deal in Buford than me because you know the area. I don't know anything about it. So if we got sent the same deal with the amount of information we have now, you would have less risk looking at that deal because you know the neighborhood to a certain degree, at least better than me,
Sure.
the area, the neighborhoods, things like that. That's one of the risks that people way undervalue. They're like, I'll go buy a deal in Ohio. I don't know shit about Ohio. I know a little bit from my last job, but very little, and it was really just to Columbus, but I don't know anything about it. So I've got to spend time researching and analyzing, finding information, and then, I'm sure you guys know, you can think about one area in town where you take a right instead of a left, or you go across this road and it changes. That's true everywhere. And I see people make that mistake a lot because they don't know the area super well. So when you're thinking about stuff, think about that of how risky is this? Because the number one thing you don't want to do is lose money, right? Everybody works, for the most part, everybody works really hard to get the money they get. Now you've saved up enough to go put it into something. Last thing you want to do is turn around and lose it. So in my mind, capital preservation first, then go make some money. The second thing, especially for you guys, because you guys probably work 40 plus hours, a ton of time, you've got a job you're focused on.
I agree with that.
Did you say 40 hours?
Yeah, exactly.
What's that like?
Time is a big thing for you guys too, right? So how much effort, right? A lot of people are like, oh, I want to own real estate because real estate's sexy, or everybody tells me real estate is a good investment. And it is. I'm not going to say it's not. But unless you're going to invest in something that's completely passive, like one of our investors, or you go invest in a fund, or you go on a crowdfunding website like, what's the big one? I'll think of it in a minute. But like that, where there's somebody else running the deal day to day, it's going to take time. Even if you hire a property manager, at some point, something's going to happen. They're going to call you. You're going to have to think about it. You're going to have to make decisions, or you're going to have to pay a bill, or something else is going to happen that's going to take away your time and your focus. You go throw money in the stock market, you don't have to think about it. Or in a bond, or in this or in that. So when you look at things, or even this specific type of deal, right? Like, for example, my deals take a ton of time. I am constantly running around, checking on contractors, putting out fires. Things break as we're breaking stuff to fix it. Things we didn't plan on breaking. So, like, you know, I would love to buy new construction Class A deals that I don't have to do any of that for, and we can just operate it. But they don't make as much money, and that's not what I want to do, because that's not what I want to invest in, and that's not what the people who invest with me want to get either. So as you're looking at not only within real estate but elsewhere, you got to start weighing up, you know, what's your time and effort worth, right? Because if you can go sell a house, go make 10 grand, 15 grand, 5 grand, or are you going to go out for a plumbing call that's going to cost you $500? You know, where does that weigh up? So there's no right or wrong answer, but that's just how you guys have to start thinking about stuff as you look at different things. Whenever you start talking about multifamily, everybody gets hung up on cap rate. So I figured I'd just start there and we'll just go through there. Do any of you actually know what it is or not really? Kind of, maybe?
Yeah.
Is it on the test for you guys?
It is.
Yes.
Well, it depends on which test we get.
It's about
But it is a good thing to discuss
Yeah.
because I have an investor right now. He wants me to find him like mobile home parks, storage units, and hotels that have decent cap rates. I'm like, well, what is decent for you? Like,
Excellent question.
yes,
Cap rates, I'm going to shit on them in a minute.
okay,
They're way overhyped. But a cap rate, the way to think about it is, if I bought this thing in all cash, what % return am I going to make? So if somebody says a 5 cap, that means whatever that building costs, you're buying it and you're making 5% day one. That's what it is from like a high level standpoint.
5% total, like as a whole, or like daily.
For the year.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you have a $1 million building, it's going to make $50,000 a year.
Okay.
The inverse is also true, so that's down there. If you want to find out what you should pay, if you're like, hey, I want to make 5% or I want to make 10% day one, you take the NOI, which is the profit after your expenses, divide it by that amount, and that gives you value. So let's say you had 50,000 in that same scenario, you divide it by 0.05, that gets you to $1 million. You divide it by 0.1, which would be 10%, that gets you to 5.
Okay.
You do it 10, 12, 15, 20 times, it becomes really easy. It sounds sometimes tricky, but if you just play around with numbers and do a little bit, it's really easy. But one thing to keep in mind, never includes mortgage payments, because you could buy it without a mortgage or with a mortgage. That shouldn't affect your value for it. It's kind of like, you ever heard the term EBITDA when you buy a business and it takes out taxes, depreciation, things like that? It's the same thing, because if I bought it for $500 and now I sell it to you for $1 million, you get a $700,000 mortgage. Or Josh looks at it and he's like, I'm going to buy it all cash. He doesn't have a mortgage. It shouldn't affect how that value is built.
Got it.
So that's that. They are important. I'm not going to say they're not important. They're important if you have a 15-unit building and a 37-unit building and you want to compare apples to apples, cap rate helps, because the 15-unit might have a $1,425 average rent and the 37-unit might have a $1,212 average rent. And it's like, you try to start doing the math on that, it's crazy. It's become simple once you put cap rates together. The other thing too is a cap rate is the measure of risk reward, right? So a lot of people think, hey, I want to buy the highest cap rate possible. That's not necessarily the case. I would not touch a deal over in Moncrief, regardless of what the cap rate was.
Oh, I don't even know.
Right? So,
Oh, this poor girl.
you know, so when you think about it,
Because I gotta move.
but that's just me. I also wouldn't buy in Arlington. I'm just not a fan of the area, but a lot of people buy it. I'm not a fan. I've never heard of there, so for me, it's like right, wrong, or indifferent. It's just
But if you had a choice,
right. But I also, you know, it's just what I focus on because I come up with deal criteria and the stuff I want to buy, and it also helps me narrow. I'm getting a little off track, but deal criteria helps me focus, so I spend less time on the stuff that I know I'm probably not going to buy or I don't want to buy.
Interesting.
But I guarantee you right now, if you had a 5 cap deal, you're going to make 5% regardless for a deal in right in the middle of Riverside or a deal right in the middle of Arlington. Which one? You're going to choose the Riverside one 10 times out of 10 if you're going to make the same amount of money. So what happens is there's more risk for certain other factors, right? Is the building older? Is it poorly run? Is it in a worse area? Is there a lot of crime? All those things are adding additional risk to it. Therefore, the cap rate in theory should be high. So when you're looking at it, I don't want you to get hyper focused on like, well, I need to get the highest cap rate possible. That's silly. That also goes across, I know we're focusing on multifamily because that's what I know, but across different types of commercial real estate. So like hospitality, hotels and stuff, you're going to get a higher cap rate because it's more risky, right? Everybody needs a place to live. Not everybody has to travel. So
unless it's COVID.
exactly. Well, COVID was the opposite, right? Nobody traveled,
Right.
and a lot of deals went underwater, which is why it's more risky. So you want to get more bang for your buck for something like that. Now, people are willing to pay whatever it is, and that's how the market comes out. So cap rate is used to kind of value deals that are in a certain bucket in terms of all those different factors to compare one to another.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, shoot.
So in that regard, when appraisals are done for somebody who gets
I hate appraisals.
I know. So what I guess what I'm saying is, do they take that into account when they compare apples to apples and what the cap rates are?
They should. But for example, I just had an appraisal done on our 24 unit, and it is way higher than anybody would ever pay for it because they used a cap rate that nobody would pay right now.
Oh.
But because they've used
Last year's. It's right now appraisals are hard too.
We're gonna go into the postings. All right. You can easily
I love the title.
mess with
I know,
cap
right?
rates. All right. Cap rates are supposed to be income minus expenses divided by the purchase price.
Mm-hmm.
But if I am going to buy a deal, here's the easiest example, right? Let's say the property I'm looking at, the taxes are 10 grand. I go to buy it and my taxes are getting reassessed. Let's say they go to 20 grand. Well, my cap rate just went down because the day I buy it, my expenses are going up. There's no way around that. So now there's 2 different types of cap rates. There's in place and then there's tax adjusted.
Mm.
Now, the other problem you're running into right now is insurance is fucking insane.
Oh, yeah.
So now you have to factor in insurance when you're buying a deal. This is right now. This may not always be the case. Right now, whenever I'm looking at a deal, their insurance is just under. So I have to adjust it for insurance. So now, again, that's affecting what the cap rate is. And then if you look at deals that are being sold by brokers, not to shit on the general population here, but a lot of time, because it's been so competitive, brokers will take the best income they can look at by playing with the numbers and throw in what are market expenses into it and say, oh, it's a 5 cap and that's market. And you're like, these market expenses are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
They're 2 years old, or it's just not right for me.
Mm-hmm.
And you're taking the best version of the income and now you're playing with it. So that's like
Right.
4 different cap rates you can come up with. Then there's something called annualized financials. So when you get a multifamily deal, typically you get something called a T12, which is the trailing 12 months of income and expenses. It's supposed to be broken out monthly. On the smaller stuff, sometimes it's broken out. It just gives you the full year. You can take the last 3 months and say, oh, well, if you continued these 3 months for a year, here's what it would be. So you would annualize it. So you take 3 months times 4, which would give you 12 months, and maybe your expenses are lower, or maybe your income is higher, right? And sometimes it's legit, right? Because if somebody's improving the property and continuing to push rents, their rent might have been a lot lower 12 months ago than it is today. So a T6 or a T3 income can be legit, or maybe they have just gotten their property super occupied more than market and they're positioning it to sell, so the income is higher than it really should be. Expenses, it's the worst. I don't ever look at T3, T6, just go for 12 months and then use whatever your own expenses are. But that's why this stuff sucks. Also, too, on the small stuff, a lot of times you'll run into long-term mom and pop owners. They don't charge a management fee. I've seen ones where they don't even have insurance. They do their own repairs and maintenance. Or sometimes you run into the inverse where they're running other stuff through the property business. So like maybe they have their car payments on it, or maybe they bought something for their house and they ran it through the business for tax write-off. So like you've got to kind of take everything with a grain of salt, and that's why I hate cap rates. The other thing you'll see, not to cut you off in a second, if you ask the seller, the buyer, and the agent or broker what the cap rate is, I guarantee you'll get 3 different answers.
I'm sure.
So cap rates are not entirely, they're not useless at all. They're useful, but
For baseline.
use your own numbers. Don't listen to what somebody else tells you, because you're going to look at it totally different.
When you go and buy a house or buy a property, you immediately request what, their financials? Their T12?
It depends. For you guys, you should always get a rent roll, which will list out all the units and what each one rents for. A real one will say like, this one's a 1-bedroom, it's this many square feet, here's the rent, here's the tenant's name, sometimes it's blacked out, but a lot of times they include it. What's their deposit, when they moved in, when they're moving out, are there any extra charges, things like that. But
basically for regular residential stuff.
Yeah, but for a smaller one, just get, each unit, what the rent is, how big it is, and the unit mix, right? Is it a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, things like that, because that will affect what the rents could be.
Yeah.
You don't really need all that other stuff until you get into the weeds, but on a lot of the stuff I deal with, it has like professional property management software, and when they pull that, all that stuff is just included. So baseline would be list out all the units, what the unit mix is, 1-bedroom, 1-bath, 2-bedroom, 1.5-bath, whatever. What's the current rent and how big is it? Because then you can analyze what the rents could be, what they should be. Because if you have a 20 unit and there's 19 1-bedrooms and 1 2-bedroom, your rent's going to be a lot lower on average than 19 3-bedrooms and 1 2-bedroom, right? Because the square footage is bigger, you can charge more rent and stuff like that.
So at what point do you ask for the financials to confirm this cap rate that they're suggesting?
For you guys, you should get it before you do any sort of offer or anything. Sometimes you might have to sign a CA or an NDA to get it. Just do it. Nobody's going to do anything about it. It's stupid. Sometimes on the smaller stuff, people ask for a proof of funds to do it. If they do, you kind of got to do it or get it. It's not super typical. And again, it's just complete bullshit because half the time, sometimes it's forged. So you never know if it's real.
Yeah.
Half the time it's like a family member's or a partner's or whatever, and it's just a bank statement that they're never going to use for the deal. And 3, who even knows if they're going to use that money to go buy it? And by the time I send you the proof of funds and you actually close, I could go throw it away in a casino. So it's like, I think they're stupid, but some people ask for it. So whatever. If they do ask for that stuff, though, you can't really fight it. It's just whatever. And if you don't have like a proof of funds or something like that, just move on. Nobody other deals. Don't worry about it too much. Unless it's like you just think it's just this unbelievable grand slam deal. Go find someone and say, "Can I borrow your proof of funds?"
Just put my name right there.
But you just say, you go, "Hey, this is my potential partner in this deal. Here's their proof of funds."
Yes.
What are they going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And if they're really going to be like, "Well, it's not your proof of funds," then they're probably going to be a terrible seller to deal with anyway. So just move on. You had a question, or you were going to say something?
Yeah, I don't know.
Go ahead.
Are you?
Say it.
I don't know. I just like. I
I
guess
know-
I want to know a different part of this. Is what I'm trying to
Sure.
like.
Say it.
I don't know what I'm trying to say. I just want to know like, how do you get into this?
Mhm.
How did like before all of this part, before you're dealing with it, like, what's the reason? Like, are you
He's
going?
an investor. He owns.
Yeah, but like, are you taking over what the apartment or the complex is that
Mhm.
people are, and like you're taking it from them?
They're buying it from you. Like,
So
they're
there's
trying to get
there's
out.
one. So it's no different. This is no different than if you bought a single family house and stuck a renter in. There's just 20 of them or 50 of them
In 1 million.
in one
But
building.
is it for sale or
The
are
building,
you
the building.
So the building
Okay,
is
so-
owned by
okay, gotcha.
one person. It's not like a condo complex.
right?
It's like
I
this
think
is.
are you asking like, are they buying the business as well in addition to?
Yeah, I guess
So
so.
typically for this stuff, 123 Main Street is owned by one person and it's owned in like an LLC.
Uh-huh.
I'm buying, and it's on one parcel. There's just different units in it. Sometimes
Okay.
it's a little finicky, but for the most part, that's what it is.
So you're not like knocking on these doors of these complexes or whatever, saying, "Hey, I want to buy this." It's already for sale. You're
Yeah,
already
usually
trying
it's,
to get rid of it.
sometimes we do direct reach out to the owner, but 99% of the time they don't live on the complex.
Gotcha.
They live, somewhere else because this is commercial real estate is real estate for commerce. It's real estate to make money.
Uh-huh.
So it's really, even though it's residential, it's really no different than if you think about like a retail center or self-storage or something like
Right,
that.
right.
Maybe if you're buying like a duplex, triplex, quadplex, the owner might live on site and rent out the other ones. It's going to probably be such a small percentage of the time
Yeah.
that it actually happens. But you're basically buying this property that just so happens to have multiple units and good chance they're already rented. You're buying this property. You're buying a business that's just heavily tied to the real estate.
Uh-huh.
Technically, the building, if you were to buy it vacant, this is getting a little technical, but if you're going to buy it vacant or occupied, it's worth less money vacant because you got to
Mhm.
spend the time, energy, and effort
Mhm.
to go lease it up and start making money.
Right.
Your debt options are going to be yours, whatever. So you're buying the property, but you're also buying basically the clients that have contracts that go into it. It's just heavily tied to the real estate, and because everybody needs housing and there's not nearly enough supply to meet all the demand, it's heavily valued because, there's just a lot of potential clients, which are the residents, for the space that you have.
So is it similar in like a typical real estate deal where you're like fighting other, investors to try and
It depends. So like sometimes we go, we'll call owners of buildings and go direct to market, or they'll be like off market through a broker or an agent, and there's only a handful. But yeah, I would say only one of the 4, we were the only person looking at it. So, it's really not unsimilar to, have you ever listed or looked at a house that had a tenant in place?
Yeah.
Same exact thing, just multiply by however many units.
Gotcha. And is there always like a lot of like supply and demand for it? Like there's a lot available, or is it?
It depends. If you wanted to go look at what's available, the 2 most popular like listing sites are LoopNet and Crexi, Crexi. I would almost bet commercial real estate and multifamily is kind of weird. A lot of times, except on on the smaller stuff, not necessarily as much. A lot of that is kind of like where deals go to die to a certain degree. Like, you'll never see, for the most part, a 150 unit complex
Right.
on like a publicly listed site.
Mm-hmm.
These brokerages, they build up their client list, they have a private email database, and then when it's on market, they send a blast email to everybody, And then, they have their own kind of private process and all that stuff.
Same like as our off markets that we do. We blast it out
Yeah.
through our email list.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you gotta be
So do you have to, do you use a broker to help you buy the deal, or are you
So
able to do that yourself?
multifamily is also really funny in that there's no buyer's agents whatsoever.
Gotcha.
It's the listing agent. When you get up into the brokerage space on that, the listing agent, at least for multifamily, I don't know as much about on some of the retail and stuff. I think it might be a little different, but I don't know for sure. The listing agent is still repping the seller, but they're playing way more in the middle ground, and they're like a therapist and a mediator, and they're basically trying to get a deal done. And
Gotcha.
they're definitely not repping the buyer. I would say 99% of the time the seller is paying commission, but they work way more in the middle than if there was a seller's and a buyer's. It's not like you're only going to bat for your seller and the buyer's agent's only going to bat for the buyer. It might happen on smaller stuff, especially since technically the 4 units is still considered residential, not commercial.
Right.
So it like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 units is still in a weird middle ground place where it's it could be like this or it could be like that. Once you get 10, 15, 20 units, it's way more commercial, and you'll have one, commercial broker. He kind of brings a listing out. He's going to play mediator. I mean, I could hire an agent, but I don't really need one. And, I'm acting as the acquisition person. So, and there's not, for when you're buying a house, I mean, there's hundreds of listings in Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm.
There's only hundreds of, multifamily properties in Jacksonville. So, the amount of inventory I see is substantially less than if I was trying to buy houses.
So you're also managing it too after you flip it and stuff? So it's a continuous process.
Yeah, no, so
That's why I didn't notice the apartment team.
That's a lot.
So you said and then just real quick, you said you have your fiance and then just 2 other people?
And how many do you manage right now?
72.
Buildings?
No, units.
That's what I see. No, that's what I'm thinking.
We have 4 properties, 72 units.
And that's just here.
That's all we have, but yeah, it's all in
In
Jacksonville.
Jacksonville?
Yeah.
Very cool.
See, I want to know how you got started. I want to know the struggle of your first one. That's
Sure.
that's
Would
what
that
I want to know.
Would
but
that
I
be
don't.
more useful for you guys? Or?
No, that's
Well,
why
because
it's me.
I have no problem
Chris,
with.
I like it all.
Okay, so
So I was
just
gonna
like-
leave. I was the goal in my mind. Maybe I should start this. Was
No,
to get
I'm
through
a
this
different
stuff,
learner.
go to Q&A, and
Yeah,
then also
Sorry,
walk through underwriting and stuff on
I'm
the whiteboard.
slow.
Yeah.
But I am totally happy to just
Listen,
jump ship. And do
Amelia,
No,
listen, this is
it's
good
just me.
because you had that client that wanted to buy that commercial space. So cap rate and all that, that's the stuff.
Yeah, but I'm like, woo.
I think
Okay,
part
yes.
of it is,
This is look. Trust me. I know I'm throwing a lot at you.
Yeah.
I also talk quick, and also I'm very guilty of underestimating how much I know compared to somebody who is still learning.
No.
So
Amelia's
if I'm
the
ever,
emotional
so
side
I
of
should
it.
have also
Oh
started
my
that.
God.
If I ever
I really
use
am.
terminology or I'm going too quick or something's not clear, just what you did, just full on stop me.
Yeah.
Have me go back and redo stuff
We
because
can
I
do
will just
follow up training too with him.
I'll just go right through.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to stop, talk about more of that stuff, or if you want to just, we can.
No,
pivot
this is
towards
not
that.
about me. This is about you guys. I am just a very different kind of learner.
I think if we came out of this meeting today and we knew the math perfectly, we still would be able to invest in this stuff. And I think part of that is because we don't know the administration side of it,
Okay.
the logistical side of it.
But we're
I think,
getting, I think, a little too ahead of ourselves because at the end of the day, we don't manage until we own. We don't own until we know what we're looking for our
That's
client, right? So
What we'll do, I'll run through this. I will try to be a little bit more brief, and then we'll get to Q&A, and then we can go to here's how to find deals and here's how to look at deals, and then do that.
good. Okay.
Very cool.
This is gonna get a little bit more technical, but I think it's very similar to cap rate, but for me, the reason I included it, I'm a little biased. It's kind of the thing that I look at the most because I think it solves for some of the stuff that cap rate messes up.
Okay.
So part of the reason cap rates suck also is when you, not only do your expenses go up, you've got closing costs, you might have renovation dollars, things like that. So
you just say wrote in like one
Yeah.
sentence, cap rate. Tell me what that is one more time.
how much money you would make as a percentage
Can you
if you bought the deal all cash. So if you bought a
Okay.
100,000
do a quick little sample to show her?
So let's say it was a $100,000 building. You wanted to make 5%. That would be $5,000.
That's your cap rate. The
5% would be a cap rate.
Okay.
If you wanted a 10%, it would be 10,000.
But
I'm
you're
using
saying
round numbers.
cap rates are bullshit.
I'm saying
It
they're
depends on
bullshit
that.
because they're easily manipulated.
Okay. Who decides the cap rate?
Based on the
You know,
Ooh.
that's
See?
Because
exactly.
that's what he was saying. You can get 3
What I was saying
different
is, if
answers.
you ask the seller, let's say a deal just closed, because what happens is I keep track of comps and stuff.
Uh-huh.
So I'll call if I can, the seller, the buyer, and the agent and say, hey, what did you pay on price per unit? I can look it up. I don't really care for the purchase price. Like, what did you pay on a cap rate? Why did you buy it? Stuff like that. The seller will say, oh, we sold it for a 4 cap, and we got a great deal. The buyer will say, oh, we bought it for a 5.5 cap. It's a great going in deal. And the agent's going to give me who the hell knows where. Probably lower because they want to sell my building, so they'll probably be closer to the seller. And it's all different, right? The buyer might be talking about what the cap rate's going to be in a couple years, saying like after we make improvements and after we push rents and after we increase the profit, our cap rate will go up over time. There's a lot of different ways you can manipulate it, and that's why I'm not a fan, because when I ask you what it is, I have no idea all the stuff behind it that's giving you that number, right?
So the seller is the one who basically comes up with that?
Anybody
Oh.
involved, anybody who looks at it. I could have looked at it as a potential buyer and said, I don't like it because it's a 4.5 cap, so I didn't offer on it. But that's using my numbers. So part of the reason is
okay, using your numbers.
yeah, so if you take 12 months of income and 12 months of expenses and you don't change it, and you say you have to buy it for this amount, in theory, everybody should come up with the same number. But everybody's going to look at that 12 months of numbers in a different way, depending upon how they like to operate deals,
That's crazy.
how they're going to project it out.
Yeah.
I don't really care. For me personally, I never look at what the cap rate is when I buy a deal. I focus on the yield on cost, and I'll get to that in a second.
Well, it sounds
because-
like it's kind of irrelevant.
Like she said,
It isn't
that gives you a baseline.
Yeah, it isn't because if you have an appraiser, they're going to use it.
Gotcha.
If you are looking at, this would get more technical and I'd have to explain it more, but if you're going for a loan, they're going to look at what's in place day one for certain loans, and then they'll give you how much you can borrow based on that. So like
Versus
a lot of
cash,
times we buy deals with very low cap rates day one, but because we're making so much improvements and we can push the rent so much, it's going to increase a lot to a place where I really like it, but I have to get a certain type of loan because a normal loan wouldn't lend on that. Or they just give me so little amount of money it doesn't make sense.
Gotcha. Okay.
How long does it usually take to close on these? Like once you're
So standard is kind of, you do like a due diligence or inspection period for like 30 days,
Okay.
and then you have another 30 days to close.
and all day,
So total for 60 to close.
60 days. Okay. And are they like, when you do an inspection, are they going in each unit, or they just kind of do?
I would highly recommend that you do. Some sellers are funny like that and they won't let you. A lot of times you may not even be able to get into every unit, either because like we bought one deal where management didn't have any keys. So they had to ask all the tenants to make copies and send it to them. So we got into like 8 out of 12. Sometimes, you have to give
And
notice.
they're all on different schedules. And
Yeah, well,
24 hours.
yeah, you can get into any unit by giving 24 hours notice. So in theory, there shouldn't be any reason you can't, but some tenants are like, I'm not going to let you in, I'm not going to do this. And like, what are you going to do? Force your way in? No. So you just move on. Sometimes, people have pets
Yeah.
and they don't put them away. And you're like, I don't really want to go into a unit with a dog that's barking and sounds like, even though I love dogs, I have 2 big
no,
dogs.
yeah, same.
I'm still like,
Yeah.
all right, I'm not gonna risk this for 1 unit
Yeah.
where I might get bit or something might happen. We'll just move on. And you can try to get back in and say, hey, they didn't put it away or whatever. But like
As long as you have
sometimes,
a general idea.
a lot of times for this stuff too, owners and sellers don't want the tenants to know they're selling it
Yeah.
because they don't want them to get like spooked or something.
Yeah.
I've never seen that happen, so I don't really understand it too much.
And wouldn't the sellers want you back, or the tenants want like improvements in their units?
But then
Doesn't
it-
necessarily
so,
mean there's-
right?
It doesn't mean that a new buyer is going to make improvements.
That's
And also
That's
too,
true.
oftentimes when a new buyer comes in, it probably means the rent's going up as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
They can't rate up.
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, so it's kind of like a finicky thing, but I would say, 30 days for inspections.
Do inspections look the same like with buying a house? Like, or do you negotiate with the seller? Like, will you, or is it like at that point you're fixing it?
I'm not
like,
as familiar with houses, so I can't really say.
Gotcha. Houses
I did
focus-
like
they
when
say
I bought
you
my house, I did like a 3-week closing because he's a hard money lender because it was in when the middle of everything was crazy. So I just like walked around one day. I was like, this looks good.
Wow.
Wow, that's
You've
trusting.
seen them.
Right?
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of
Okay.
knew. I did have a couple vendors, and I had the plumbing line scoped. I had a roofer come out, even though it was a brand new roof. I had an AC guy come out. I had an electrician come out. So like,
You did.
I did inspections, but it was like I walked around for like an hour with them, and then I was like, okay, this looks good. So
So I guess what she's asking is like for residential, like let's say the HVAC's on its last leg, we ask for the seller to replace it. You don't really do that.
Do you negotiate like that?
you
or is
can.
it-
So typically, it's as is.
Right. Okay.
Now, some of the questions you'll be asking when you're looking at a property is like, typical term is what's deferred maintenance. So like, what are big ticket items that are on its last leg? So like, are the roofs 20 years old?
Yeah.
Is the AC, you'll have multiple ACs. How many ACs have been replaced in the last couple of years? How many are this and that? A lot of times you don't get great information, so you go tour the property yourself. A lot of times you'll go tour and hopefully there's a vacant unit that you can walk in and see.
Mhm.
But you can walk around and see all the AC condensers outside. For the most part, people replace the air handler inside and the AC outside at the same time. Sometimes it doesn't happen. That's, you're trying to budget, and then when you do your inspections, and if you go in and they're like, hey, all the ACs were replaced in the last 5 years, and it was just all the outside units, all the ones weren't, you're like, it's about to fall apart, and it's every single unit. You lied to me. You can ask for a reduction. Typically, they don't fix. Typically, you just get a reduction, and then you get it fixed yourself. But it just depends on how competitive the deal was. They might say, screw you, we've got 6 other backup offers.
Right.
You're either buying it or you're not. At 1.2, it's definitely cooled off now, but a lot of deals were being sold with non-refundable money day one. So you were kind of like, you could ask, but it really depends.
Yeah.
So I mean, a lot of stuff can come up in inspections and stuff. Another part of inspections though is inspecting all the leases. So if they give you a rent roll, making sure everything matches up, making sure the leases are legal. So I would always send a lease to a real estate attorney, make sure the lease is good.
See, that would be the part that scares me the most about this is all the legal that goes into this.
Yeah, you don't
It's really-
pretend to be legal. You
It's
say
really not that much for the
Yeah.
stuff. And I don't want to presume, but I mean this in a nice way. The stuff that you guys would be looking at for a first deal, sub 10 units most likely, you're going to use a standard real estate contract most likely. So it's either no different or very similar to what you guys already use.
Mhm.
You're going to only have a handful of leases. You can read them yourself in an hour or something. You send them to an attorney, they'll review it and let you know. You would have a list of items you want to see, like, hey, I want to see a rent roll from this year and last year so I can see kind of what was in place, or I need the financials for the past 2 years, or you're going to ask for a survey and all that stuff. But if you talk to an attorney, like if you're like, hey, I want to do this, I'm going to go buy a 3 to 6 unit in the next 12 months.
Yeah, it's literally just me in this whole thing.
If you were like, hey, I want to go, you should go talk to an attorney and be like, hey, what's the stuff I'm going to need to do this? And they'll also help advise. advisor for this stuff. So it's like, there's a lot of stuff in place. You do a Google search of like, hey, what's the items I need to buy a multifamily property? You'll find 100,000 articles on all the items you need, and most of them will probably be too much for what you need. Like, if I was offering on a 100-unit property, there's a lot more stuff in my request than the 10
just if you're really interested, so this is a little different than multifamily, but I had a client last year, we submitted an LOI for a hotel off
What is
of
that?
Lane Avenue,
LOI.
a letter of intent.
Okay.
So it's like writing a contract, but not, you're not like bound until you guys come to terms on everything. And all the documents requested, financials, like tax, state, or what do you call it, tax returns, expenses and all that. I have all that if you guys ever wanted to like go through it. The deal didn't close. That's the bad thing about those kinds of properties. You get into it and then it's like, I mean, it was like a $5 million hotel was gonna make
Wow.
pretty nice chunk, and it didn't happen.
Yeah, so an LOI is simply, you know, when you go through a contract and you have all the inputs you got to do, like closing time frame and how much time and deposit and all that stuff. It's basically just outlining all that stuff. It's less important for you guys because you have access to the contracts. When I'm writing up an offer on a $20 million property, a lot of we're not using a standard contract. It's a drafted contract with the attorneys. So I'm paying attorneys to draft up a contract. An LOI doesn't cost me anything. It's a template. So I can just fill out the general standard, like here's the 15 most important terms we're going to do. It doesn't cost me anything. It allows me to put in an offer where I don't have to pay an attorney every time I submit an offer.
Gotcha.
Because I might go under contract on 1 in 20 properties I offer on, or 1 in 50 properties I offer on. I'm not spending a few $100 every time I offer. So not as important for if you were going to offer on a 5-unit deal. You'd be like, hey, just be like, you know, you could type up an email and be like, hey, we want to offer $500,000, 30 inspection, another 30 days to close. Here's our deposit. What do you think?
Yeah, it's kind of like a verbal.
Yeah, for you guys, it would be a little bit more loose, where you'd be like verbal, and then you'd be like, I'm an agent, I have access to the contracts, I can draw it up, or you can draw it up, or however you want to do it. An LOI is more important for the commercial stuff, where you have to spell out, like, especially for hotels, this is getting technical, but there's the real estate and then there's personal property, right? Like all the furniture, and they're taxed differently. So you got to spell out how much you're paying for the property, how much you're paying for the personal property.
Gotcha.
Never going to come up for you. Don't worry about it.
No,
but I'm just explaining why an LOI is more important.
Unless you're selling $1 million house that they want to discuss selling buying furniture.
Yeah.
Right.
In there. When you do your LOI, and you offer your binder amount, whenever everybody's on the same page and they sign, do you wait to deposit your binder upon signing the LOI, or do you wait till do it on
contract?
Okay. I'm just
So usually it's within a couple days of contract signing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I would never
submit.
I would never advise you guys to submit a
Right.
deposit before having a contract.
Yeah.
Do what you want, but I would.
Yeah, no. I was just curious. Some people do it differently. Like they consider LOI like the initial, like, okay, let's put your binder in while you wait, And I'm like,
so LOIs, mine says on it, this is non-binding. So like even if both parties sign it, I don't technically have to go to contract. I've had it 2 different ways where I've had an LOI not go to contract. One, the seller flaked and sold it for an extra $1 million.
Oh, God.
A couple months later, this was like a $4 million property. So I can't really blame them. That's a substantial
you would have done the
increase.
same.
And the other one was I had an LOI and I had a 1031 investor. Do you guys know what that is?
We're gonna have much training on that, but yeah.
Okay. Basically, a guy. I had one person who was going to be my partner and was going to fund the whole thing. We had a signed LOI, paid my attorneys to draft up the PSA, and then he ghosted me.
Oh my
Wow.
It's a little bit more, it's not as callous as that. He went into surgery and had some stuff happen, but he could have still done it.
Yeah.
But
He was having a fungus removed from his toe. It's not. Commercial's a lot more like cutthroat.
It's like yes, no, yes, no.
It's also slower.
Yeah, it takes forever.
It's a
That's why I asked how long it takes.
But
It's
but
the
it sounds
contract
like
slower.
You're always having that cash flow, which is like a good thing, right?
In theory, yes, but here's one thing that
You don't get paid.
I am somewhat envious of like you guys of is, let's say, uh, investing money makes you a couple percent a year, even if it's 10%, right? If I want to make good money, 100 grand, 200 grand, 50 grand, 100 grand at 10%, which doesn't happen. It's usually like 6 or 7. I'd have to have $1 million invested. If it's 5%, I could have $2 million invested. It takes a lot of money invested to make back dollars that support the average person.
And there's always risk.
And there's risk, right? If you have hotels and COVID happens, or you had a bunch of Airbnbs, poof, your money's gone.
Right.
So what's bad about what I do is the way my stuff is structured up. I get money up front and on the back end when deals buy and sell. I get a little bit up front. Most of it's on the back end when I perform. Basically, when I hit certain returns for investors, I get paid more.
It's like you have to go in debt in order to make money, I feel.
Well,
I mean, maybe
have
not
to.
now
You
for
could-
you, but I feel like starting out is kind of how it would be.
What do you mean by that? When you say
I
go in
don't
debt,
know.
do you mean
Because I don't have $1
Purchase-
million laying around to go buy
No,
a property.
but you're making income from your job. So you don't have to retire tomorrow, correct?
Right.
This is
Obviously, you would
long-term.
love to.
Long term.
Real estate is not get rich quick. Real
Right.
estate is not, you could buy and sell property and make 100 grand, but it's a one-time thing. It's not reoccurring. And you might have hundreds of, over time or even quickly, you might have hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars in equity tied up. But equity doesn't pay the bills.
Right.
Real estate gives lower returns because it has such a long track record of
It's long-term
performing,
investment.
being lower risk, and not losing people money. So where I said I'm envious of you guys is if I don't make
Sorry.
consistent money. I know it's agents and commissions, so it's not maybe consistent, but it's more consistent than me. I bought 4 deals last year. I got 4, commissions technically.
How big were those connections?
It's 2% of the purchase price. So we bought $4 million last year. So I made $80,000, and I rolled all of that and more into it. Investors want to see me invest money into the deals. So I actually, when I buy deals, I'm actually in the red because
Oh yeah.
they want to see me co-invest in
That would
deals.
just give me anxiety all the time.
Well, the reason I didn't do it for a while was I was building up money so that I could, save up and go do it. And it's also why I'm doing smaller deals and other stuff too. It's also why I manage, because I get management fees and stuff. It's not
So you were building up money doing what? This?
for my last company, yeah. So I've been saving for 5-6 years.
Hey, so deep breath.
But here's
We're learning for clients right now. What we all have $1 million to invest.
but here's
But you also have
here's where
investors.
it's
Yeah.
here's where it helps you guys, right? If you make X amount, I'll use 100 grand for round numbers, and you can take $20,000 and invest that into something. 20,000, you go buy $100,000 property, right? All right, let's bring this down real quick. Here's the path of progress for you, right? It's long. It's not going to be the most fun thing you're ever going to see, but let's say you're able to consistently put in 20K. Okay, it's the same number. I'm lazy. 5% of 20, 10% would be 2 grand. So that'd be, let's say you're making 1K a year. Oh, that's a 1. Then this year, now you have 40K, so you're making 2K a year. And we're assuming in this scenario, you're not spending this money. Okay, This is all about buying properties to reinvest. Your job is supporting your lifestyle. That's, in my opinion, the best way to do it. Another 20K, you get 3K,
Did you turn off?
4K, 5K, 6K, right? That's a year. Nobody's retiring off that, right? But you had an $80,000 mortgage on this one, and let's say you paid down, I don't know, 10 grand, right? So now you've picked up some equity. But let's say now this property that you bought for 100 grand 7 years ago is now worth 150 grand. And this is also not including, this is $1,000 on the rent you're charging today. In 7 years or 6 years, whatever, that 1,000 is probably 1,200, 1,300, something like that. But for easy math, let's say that. So now this one's worth 150, right? We go get a 75% loan. 100,000 would be 2/3. let's say it was 110 for easy math, right? This 80, I know I'm all over the place, right? But this 80 is now 70K. You go get a new loan for 110,000. So you pay off the 70 and you're left with another 40. Now in year 7 or 6 or 8, whatever the hell this is, you have your original 20 plus the 40 and you're investing 60K, and 6,000 would be 3K plus the 6K scenario up to 9K. So now in 6-7 years, assuming the market's rolling and everything, now every year you're refining a deal and this is starting to roll. So now instead of, also, I would hope in 7 years your income's gone up too. So maybe by this year you're investing 30K a year, 35K a year. So it's over time that eventually you pick up whatever you can put down. And in, so now you're up to 9K. Let's say the next year you got another 3K, you'd be at the 12K. Then you go up to, let's say you go up to 16K because the deal's worth more. Another 4 would be 20. Then 24. And then what's going to happen is that original deal, you refi, you can refi again and all that stuff. And
that's $24K a year.
Yeah, that's assuming you invested $20,000 a year.
Okay. On one property.
Yeah, I mean you can do whatever you want with that for this.
Yeah.
Yes, but what I'm trying to show is that what starts off as maybe a rounding error can work its way up into something substantial. And honestly, I think I'm really lowballing what happens. If you really did build this out with how much each property matures, how much your cash flow would go up per year, 2-3% per year, right? If you did 1,000 times 2%, but it compounds every year, right? So you go from 1,000 to 1,020, then 2% on 1,020, right? Because it compounds on top of each other. It'll go up more over time. But that whole time, not only are you paying down the mortgages, so you're picking up more equity, you can increase the cash flow, pick up more deals. Then when you start getting into places like this or wherever, you could look to sell a couple deals and then roll it into a larger building, which might be more efficient, might make you more money, different things like that.
This is long-term game.
This is not, you're not going to buy a deal
and
retire,
right.
most likely, unless you got $2 million.
Donald Trump started like this. Well, I don't know where he started, but he owns lots of buildings because probably something similar. He started with one and then Yep.
And then if you run into something like what's happened the last 2 years, where let's say you're renting this for $1,000 and your rent goes to freaking $1,500 because the market's gone crazy. Instead of making $1,000, you're making $1,500. And now instead of your property only being worth $150, it's worth $200. And instead of pulling out 40 grand, you're pulling out 70 plus 120, no, 140, 130. You're pulling out $130,000, and 130 times 3 would be, or 5 would be 13, would be 7, 6.5. So now instead of adding 3, you'd be adding 6.5. So that would put you up to 12 something, and that's for every deal you bought since. And that's also you're making 5%. So the reason you buy properties with debt is for 2 reasons. 1, less money out of your pocket. 2, in theory, it's not happening right now, is if you're buying a deal for, I'm trying to think the best way to do this, where it's makes sense. Oh,
yeah, but you don't have to act like Rain Man.
I'm usually pretty good at it.
Yeah, no, I've seen some of your spreadsheets. You're never scared.
Let's say you buy a property for $100,000, okay, and it was a 6 cap, so you'd be making $6,000 per year. That's if you bought it all cash, right? You got to come up with 100,000. Let's say we go borrow 80,000. I'm going to go low. I know interest rates aren't 4%, but it's just to illustrate the spread. So now you need 20,000 in a deposit.
Is this the second house?
Any house.
The $80,000 one?
This is just showing. I'm just trying to show how a mortgage helps increase cash flow.
Okay.
So instead of just making 5 or 6%, if you then took a loan of 80,000 at 4%, and because I'm just using a regular calculator, it's only interest only, it's not amortizing. Your mortgage payment would be $3,200. Okay. We were making 6,000 all cash. So you subtract 3,200, that would be 2,800. You with me so far or no? 2,800 divided by 20,000 to show our percentage return would be 14%, which is no longer 6%. So when I'm saying make 5%, I was probably being overly conservative. I don't expect that to happen today because interest rates are, I don't know about for houses, but for us right now, they're like 5.5 to 6.
Or, yeah, 6.
And we're buying stuff at 5.5. So it's not really making a difference. But where it does make a difference is kind of what this yield on cost is saying, is we buy a property that's making $6,000. Okay? It's a 6% cap rate.
The $6,000 is coming from.
That's the income minus the expenses.
Okay.
So your tenants are paying you $12,000 a year in rent, and you've got $6,000 in expenses.
Gotcha.
Okay? That could be property taxes, insurance, probably not utilities because they'll pay it, but repairs and maintenance, management fees, whatever. Okay?
That seemed like a lot of money
Long-term gain.
For the expenses or
to make.
Well, it's not, you're not supposed to live off this. You're living off your house.
eventually
Yes.
you get to that. But where I'm going with this, give me one
It's not
second.
fully active either. Like, it's going to take effort, but it's not like you're working a 9 to 5 every day doing it. That's kind of the difference. And you can have this in the back, semi in the background, while you're still like selling houses as a real estate agent.
So you work another job?
Well, I mean,
The way
So like I have
You could have just started
like,
with
I
as
have
many things as you
a
did.
realtor that we used to work with is Haley Davis. I don't know if you know her, but she makes $50K. She puts it in her house.
Mhm.
She has long-term rental. She makes another $50K. She puts it in her house. She has a long-term rental. She runs she does all of her real estate full-time, 40 hours a week, and then she has 6 rental properties on the back burner.
Mhm.
Now she only makes $500, $1,200 a month from each one.
That's still good.
And that's good. I mean, that could be another like paycheck, or you keep that money, wait till you make another 20K, put in another unit. But if you're doing multi-family, and you have 4. This is shooting hot, like
this
it's
is
hard
this
to
is
find
super.
$100,000.
Where are you?
Yeah.
I
But-
did it for easy math
Yeah,
for me.
yeah.
But where are you finding $100,000 house?
Yeah.
So the numbers are going
Yeah.
the numbers are going to
Not
be
even in the
larger,
neighborhood
but
right
it's
now.
also going to require more than $20,000.
Yeah.
So maybe it's 50 and you're buying a $250,000 house, and 50 grand is making you $2,500.
Yeah, so your mortgage is paid, and then you have a little bit of money, for expenses. If
Which-
something's wrong, you gotta fix.
Which bank can you put $50,000 into a savings account and make that much money a year? You can't.
So just think long.
At least not in my bank.
And then, like he said, when you have 4 units, and you have 2 that are producing a lot, or you don't want those anymore. The equity that you gain is so high, you can sell those 2, and then you make whatever.
The thing is besides investing in something that's ridiculously risky, like crypto, or I mean, none of us have the capability to do like angel investing where you invest in a startup. I mean, you could if you have a friend. even if you made 20% a year on $50,000, that's still only 10 grand. Obviously, that's a lot better. I'd be really happy to make 10 grand
But the
on
percent.
50,000,
Yeah.
but it's still going to require you to continually invest and put money away. There's no property or investment, especially one that's very passive where you don't have to do a ton of work on and spend time, that you're going to put in 50 and make, $50,000 a year. What you could do for something like this, if you have more of a risk appetite, is do like short-term rentals,
Yeah.
where the income you can make on it could be 2 to 2.5 more. That's why the one I'm buying. So what you're saying is the whole reason I'm doing it for the triplex we're buying. When I do the math on that, it's like we're buying it for like 200 grand. Probably cost us between 300 and 350. It's probably worth about like 450 when we're done, which is great. I can sell it, make 80 grand after closing costs, maybe 75 and fees and stuff like that. But if I kept it as a long-term rental and I refinanced, pulled some money out, probably get back 10, 15, 20 grand, something like that. It would make me like $3,000 a year. That doesn't really do anything. So I was like, all right, maybe I'll just flip it. I'll make 75 grand and, I'll just do whatever, right? Just have some extra cash or whatever. When I talked to a few people that were doing short-term rentals, I have no idea. I'm still figuring out. We'll see what happens. Using the information I have so far, it seems to be like it'll make more like 15,000, which is, still not anything amazing, but it's more. But there's a lot more risk involved. It's going to take more time to manage it because we're going to manage it ourselves, and things like that. So you can go that route, or you can mix them up and do whatever. But I promise you, if you're spending any more than 40 hours a week on this stuff, the agent stuff, you're probably not going to have time to manage. Maybe if you have one Airbnb, maybe you'll have time to manage it. If you start buying a few, it's going to become too much, and then you're going to have to either hire a manager or convert to long-term rentals. And I would still advise you to hire a management company, because your ROI on your time is going to be better spent here, saving up money to pour into other stuff that will make you more money over time. It's slow. It's really slow. I started in 2016 was the first money I put into real estate, and I still don't make nearly. I'm almost at the bubble where it covers my expenses.
So
And I'm active. Yeah, it's a slow burn. Now, look, you can, what's great for you guys, right? Like one thing I debated about talking about was competitive advantage. It's like whenever you look at a deal, you should ask yourself, why should I be the one to buy this deal, not somebody else? Because I promise you, if you found like a listed 20-unit deal, I probably already know about it, and I've either offered a lot less than they're asking, or I've passed on it for one reason or another. Now, it might be because it's in Arlington and I don't want to buy it, or it might be because it's overpriced, needs a ton of work, and doesn't make what it needs it to make. Or it could be it doesn't make what I want to make because I have investors, I charge fees, they need to make money, so I need to make more to make the same amount than you would. But you might be able to buy the same deal and make more than I would, and that could be your competitive advantage. Or it could be you're an agent, you talk to owners all day, every day, you come across a deal that makes a lot of sense, way more than what you would find on market, and you can make more than what you would find just buying something. I would still be shocked if you find anything that makes, you put in 50 grand and you're making 20 grand. It's just not realistic. If you do, kudos, and I would like you to send me some deals. But that's just probably not going to happen. So it's definitely more of a longer term game. But what happens is every year you wait, just the longer it's going to take.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be real estate either, right? Like going back to the risk reward stuff is like, you know, the tough thing about real estate is you can't put in like $100 a week.
Mhm.
You want to go buy an index fund, you can invest $100 a week and build it up over time. And it literally takes no time off your plate. Literally zero. It takes you as long as to, you know, you gotta set up the brokerage account with like Robinhood or something. You gotta put the money in and then buy it. But then every other time it'd take you 5 minutes to buy consistently. Or you could set up like auto buy. That takes you no time. So that's where I'm talking about, like, you gotta weigh stuff up.
Yeah.
But I promise you, it's slow.
So have you seen, so like in other cities, like Charleston or
Mhm.
Savannah, whatever, they have, and the zoning could be different, like I know they're kind of going back and like reevaluating some of the zoning for Airbnb, but have you seen here specifically,
Mm.
4-unit building that's strictly just Airbnb? Because I haven't really seen that much.
I have not really paid attention to it until very recently.
Okay.
However, when I was looking for the one we are buying, there is a 4-unit deal in Murray Hill that does do it.
Mhm.
And I spoke to a woman that has a 4-unit over in Bay Meadows that she does it as well.
Really? Okay.
So you can. What I would, and this is just my gut and my personal thing. The one thing I would think is I would probably never mix the two, long-term and short-term.
In the
I
same
just-
building?
Yeah, I just think
Correct,
that's
yeah.
maybe on the same property if you have 2 separate buildings, but
There's just too much in and out.
yeah,
People
I
want
just
to feel
think,
safe.
Long-term renters don't want short-term rentals.
yeah, they don't want them
That's what I was
there.
saying, like,
You
if it's
get
a
one
full
bad
unit-
person that's going to create a noise problem and
Yes.
do whatever, and then they're going to be like, you know, the long-term person might say, I never knew who was going to be in there or whatever. Or maybe you have one unit that's long-term and they help you manage it. And you're like, hey, I'll give you half off your rent if you help run this thing.
Yeah, so there's like.
So you can. I have
I wouldn't
people in
mix
place
it,
that I
but-
don't need to do that.
Yeah.
I personally would never mix them just because
No.
I can see I'm thinking about it risk reward, right?
Yeah.
The risk of that person being upset, deciding not to pay rent. I now have to go to court to evict them. They're gonna fight it because I'm running it, blah blah blah, and who
I would
knows how
just
that
strictly
works.
probably keep it like one
Yeah.
or the other. Yeah.
I think you could.
I just.
The thing for me with Airbnb, and that's why I haven't done it yet, is the supply and demand, and it feels like everybody is trying to do it
It's
now.
very saturated. If you look on Airbnb in general, it's very saturated.
Yeah. So the only reason I'm actually even doing it is because my fallback plan is I'll convert it to long-term
That's
rentals
what I
and
was
sell
trying
it
to say.
and make some money.
Like, and like if the zoning changed or whatever, like
Yeah.
you'd still be able to put long-term
Yeah, so
rents
that's-
in those units.
In theory, yes.
So I was just thinking, like, if you were trying to, it's more work to do the short term, so it's, you know, have those management companies in place and you're paying them 12% to 20% or whatever their cut is.
Yes, something like that.
And then, but they're doing everything for you, and but that the turn it's $200 a day. You're doing nightly rentals instead of, and then if you rent it out 15 days out of 30 with 200 times 15, that's one unit. You might be able to make a faster return, but there's a lot more time involved.
Well, I wonder too why you choose multifamily versus just like a single family home to flip and rent out.
Because one, it's the same thing. Two, more often than not, the purchase price for a house for what I can get for rent is much higher on the house than the apartment. And three, I'd rather have 20 units in one place than 20 units scattered. I'm already running around like crazy between 4 different properties.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine doing it with 72 houses. I mean, if I could buy,
And I kind of look at it as like
Yeah.
he's also buying a business as well, kind of. And that's just my process,
Yeah.
my thought. But then you're kind of revamping it all.
Yeah. it's also too, some other stuff is like the insurance is different, the lending is different. There's some minute stuff to it. Also too, the reason I don't love houses is it's a lot tougher to budget for like repairs and maintenance and something called replacement reserves. So like if you need to replace an AC or you need to replace a roof, we escrow a certain amount every single month for each property. when something comes up that we have to do. For a house, I mean, if I was to use the same math, right? Like we tend to do around like $500 a unit per year. If I did that for a house, $500, and then my AC goes, I'm gonna have to come up with $4,000, $3,000 to replace that AC. Doesn't work the same. If I had 72 houses in one thing, you start to treat it as more of like a portfolio thing. But one, there's a ton of buyers for apartments. There's not as many buyers for large portfolios of single family houses. Two, a lot more paperwork. You've got 72 addresses versus 4. You've got 72 closings versus 4. You've got 72 loans versus 4. Maybe I get a portfolio loan, but if I'm picking them up one by one, probably not. 72 different insurance policies. It's just a lot more work.
And then, now, do you get any type of like tax break when you do this? Like, because you can't homestead it, obviously, so you're paying full.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
but that would be the same for a house.
Right,
You can't
because you can't
homestead
homestead it.
Yeah, we don't get any sort of tax break.
Okay. But yeah, because then, like, when I think about it as if you're just doing houses, you know, your return is going to be way less. And if you're only making $300 a month for that house, how are you going to have the reserves to fix something if it goes wrong? A $12,000 roof, $8,000 AC unit. You know,
The answer for that is you should close with extra cash and keep some extra cash in the bank for a rainy day if you do buy a house.
hopefully some of those things are up.
But it's when I buy a 20-unit complex, I can sleep better with less reserves up front because we're reserving more. Because I can play more of the law of averages on 20 units than on 1. And you know, some of it depends too on the condition of the property. If you buy a new construction home, you're probably better off than if you buy a 1970s home.
No.
Right.
I'm just like,
Well, you might get
Yeah.
AC stolen. So.
I guess.
So
It's
it's just different, and it's also there's a lot of other reasons, but there's just why I focus more on that. Cool. What you still don't look satisfied. You still
No, I am. I guess I'm just thinking of it like personal preference too. I don't know. I guess if I could secure a tenant that would like be with me for a long, long time, I would just much rather have like 1 or 2 single family homes and just like always have that
So,
cash flow.
Tenant turnover on houses is on average a lot lower than apartments. So you are more likely to have people pay and stay longer. They also you'll have less expenses because they'll have all the utilities in their name. A lot of apartments have one water sewer meter for all the units. We bill back for a share of it, but it usually doesn't cover the full cost. They usually do their own landscaping, their own pest control. And they just tend to, in general, take better care of the place on average than somebody does an apartment. Most people come in, they're like, it's an apartment, give a shit.
Yeah.
Some people take decent care of it, but I would say on average it's worse for an apartment than a house. Not that our stuff is bad and that we have bad tenants. A lot of them take really great care of the place, better care than I ever took care of my apartment. But I would say on average, people probably take better care of a house they rent than an apartment.
Yeah.
Also, a lot of times too, people are renting houses for school districts if they have kids. So they might stay longer, whereas like an apartment, I don't care unless I have kids and I'm renting an apartment. But a lot of renters don't have kids. They don't care what the school district is. And even if they do have kids, they've got a couple of years to figure out where to move to. And they move at the end of their lease. Or they can break it and move early. People with kids, and I would imagine more renters in houses have kids than apartments. And there's a good chance they're going to pay strong attention to the school district. I've never had a tenant at my apartment when I'm showing it ask me about the school district. I don't even know it.
Yeah, and I guess do you see like more of just like young adults that are renting from you, or is like
we do,
the
but
clientele kind of-
we have a lot of we only have studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms. So none of our properties have 3 bedroom units, which would lend themselves more to families. We definitely stray more towards younger, partially because half of our stuff is in Riverside, so you get a lot more of that. All of our stuff in Riverside is 1 bedrooms or studios. Our 2 bedroom stuff in Orange Park is kind of a mix. But half of our 2 bedrooms there only have 1 bathroom. So you tend to get younger people with that too versus older or more families.
What's your place in Orange Park?
So it's off of Park Avenue,
Yeah.
right by, it's actually right across from the Orange Park Elementary School, if you know where that is. But it's like halfway down Park before you went into Kingsley. And then our other one's closer to Middleburg down Blanding Ave, right by where College Street separates. There's an area with a bunch of like quadplexes, and 6 of them.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, cool. What else? We've gone totally off script. So
I'm very sorry.
No, it's
I
okay.
really am.
Honestly, I was very tempted to just come in here and just be like, let's just do Q&A.
Yeah.
But I kind of just started running with this because I was like, all right, I'll do something. So
Show I did some work.
Yeah.
You made
Exactly.
nothing.
So what else would be helpful? We'll just be writing Q&A. What else is going to be helpful for you guys?
Let me not talk so much. Does anybody else know anything?
Yeah,
I guess one of my big hangups with this is, so like you said,
Oh my
if I
gosh.
were to see a listing for like 20 bucks or something, chances are that you've already seen it and X'd off the list.
Yeah.
It feels like, at least my mentality is that's going to be the case for pretty much everything that I look at in terms
What
of
was your
an
question? I
investment
missed
piece. Well, I guess going back to the competition thing of it, it's like for individuals like us to try to get into a game such as this, the competition that we face from people like yourself and corporations that are already doing this, like the same things we're looking for. I guess where do we find the room to either? I mean, is it strictly a capital thing for individuals like us? Like, are we competing? Do we have to have the same amount of cash as?
Yeah.
So
Like, I guess that's what
I
I'm.
want to know how, like, I guess I want to know your story so I can know, like,
sure.
how the heck did you even get started in this? Can I do this with where I'm at now? Like,
So
I know.
I'll answer the direct question, then kind of go into it.
yes.
So
answer
the
him
2
first.
advantages you have over me are, 1, you have a full-time job that pays you money.
True.
A lot of what I do, I have to find something that pays my investors and pays me.
Mhm.
So I probably out of the box have to pay less than you. I would have to pay less than you. So you can, because you don't have to split it with partners, because you don't have fees you have to pay to somebody, you can inherently pay more and make the exact same returns that I would make. Like, let's say if we're going to do the same exact thing with the property, but I charge stuff to live because I operate on behalf of the investors, and they probably have a similar return expectation to what you would have because it's not anything crazy. I inherently have to pay less to buy the same deal. The other thing too is, you don't have, if your intention is not to retire on what you're investing, you can look at what it's going to be worth in 15 years. And you can say, you know what? If it makes me $1,000 or $800 a year, $200 doesn't really matter. So I can pay 5% more or 10% more.
That's what you're saying.
So it's kind of that thing where it's like, it all depends on how you're going to look at it. I'm not looking at a new constructed 5-unit building that's turnkey. It doesn't do it for me. I would love to because it's easy to manage, but that's not really what I'm focused on for the business. For you, it's probably great.
You have a niche.
It's easy. It's easy to manage. It's not a lot of headaches, not a lot of unexpected expenses you're going to run into if it's built right. Hopefully it is.
Yeah.
And there's just not as many people like me looking for that stuff.
Sure.
It's more individuals, business owners, whatever, that are looking for that kind of stuff. There's not a lot of that out there, but that's one thing is like, you've got to figure out the deal criteria that makes sense for you. I wish I made a slide on this now. But what you got to think about is you got to work backwards, right? The whole thing with investing is working backwards. So what you've got to answer yourself is, what do I want to achieve? Is it $100,000 in cash flow? Is it just having a couple rentals that make a couple bucks? Is it, leaving the brokerage business to be a full-time investor. Then, once you kind of know what you're shooting for, then you start figuring out, how do I get there, and what do I need to do, and how long is it going to take? Then, once you know what you want to do and how you're going to get there, then you can start figuring out what types of deals or investments are going to get me there in that time. So if you're like, hey, I love being an agent, I'm going to do this until I'm 85. Just buy market deals, because putting money in earlier is going to be way better than waiting for the perfect deal and sitting on cash, most likely.
Yeah.
But over a 30-year horizon, I believe. Yeah, maybe in a short term, there's a little dip and you break even for 6 or 12 months. But in 30 years, you're going to forget that. So if that's your plan, you can buy any deal that's marketed.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter as much to you today. To me, it matters a whole lot today.
Right.
And also my timeline is significantly shorter. My investors don't want to be in the deal for 3 years. They want to be in it for 5 to 7.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at a much shorter time horizon than you might be. So that's how I would go about doing this, figuring out what's the end goal and then what's going to get me there, and then coming up with the buckets that are going to do it.
No, that answers it. I appreciate that. Okay, so let me ask you then, if you've been in it 7 years now, and you say you're just more or less breaking even in terms of your expenses, what is your intent in being in?
When I said that, I was talking about what I'm making from my invested cash to what my living expenses are.
Gotcha.
Just to clarify
Okay.
that.
So what are your goals then, as an extension of that question? Why are you investing in real estate?
My original goal when I set this out was in 10 years to hit 500 million in assets owned and managed.
Okay.
I actually, when I was, so I'm going to back up half a step, but answer the question. I'm going to go into the kind of the story thing. So 2016, I was working a job I absolutely hated. My mom and my cousin bought a single family flipping course and invited me along to it. We tried, I'm from New York originally, so this is all done in New York. We were trying to flip houses, got nowhere, did a bunch of networking stuff, bunch of classes, whatever.
Got nowhere?
Got nowhere. I've never flipped a house.
Oh.
I have one failed flip to my name in Charleston, South Carolina.
Oh, man.
That was-
I was there too.
I lost. Luckily, there was a lot of partners involved, so I only lost like $8,000, but I lost money. And I can talk more about
So you
that.
went through the course and you just decided.
So we went through the course. We started trying to do it in New York. The problems we ran into were a couple-fold. So it was fortune builders. And there's nothing wrong with fortune builders per se, but the problem we ran into were twofold. One, their whole course was built around having these sheets that were quick estimators for costs, and they didn't work in New York because the costs were too low. Because New York, the labor is a lot higher, the taxes are a lot higher. It didn't work. In hindsight, not really a great excuse, because I could have just called 50 different vendors, found that pricing, adjusted everything, and made it work. But the larger problem we ran into was the stuff you had to buy it for us at the time just wasn't making enough for what we wanted to do. And we were just like, we probably could have made it work, because I know you can make anything work, because there's people that do it up there, they do it well, or they seem to do it well. And I have one buddy who I know decently well who does it at a pretty decent scale and does well. But at the time, we just looked and we're like, this is either going to take a ton more time, a ton more effort, and we just don't think it's what we want to do anymore. So we started looking at different options and just learning more in general, because like a lot of people, you hear about flipping, but who the hell talks about investing in apartments or buying strip malls or buying self-storage? Like, nobody. I didn't know people owned apartment complexes. Like,
Right.
I didn't know apartment complex. I hope this doesn't come across in the wrong way, but like growing up, apartment complexes didn't register to me, except that it was just another building.
Mm-hmm.
And now when I go back to like my hometown and stuff, I'm like, oh, they're like around, and like I knew they were around, but I view it through a totally different lens.
Yeah.
So, it's just not something that's common. But like I knew people owned houses, and like probably quasi knew people flipped them when I was younger, but it wasn't a thing. So anyway, we, for better or for worse, decided to pivot what we were doing. Did a bunch of networking. met a guy by the name of John Cohen. He had been doing some small multifamily out of state, so like small in the context of what I used to do. So like 8 to 80 units out of state, and would do syndication. So which is where you raise money from investors and you charge fees. What I'm doing now, but because it was out of state, we would hire a third-party property management company and all that stuff. Partnered on a couple of deals with him, but he was transitioning out of that stuff to focus on much larger buildings, like institutional stuff, 100 to 500 units in the Southeast and Midwest. Him and his partner, Don, had just started a company called Toro. They had their first 3 deals under contract, which was like 600 units, and were thinking about bringing in help. I just happened to be chatting to John one day. I was like, I hate my job. I need to get out of this. And he's like, why don't you come work for us on a trial basis? So I did a 3-month trial. I think I was making like $200 a week or something. And that turned into 4.5 years. That turned into me taking over everything in the Florida region. And actually like starting the Florida region. So I took it from 0 to 1,000 units. And when I was there, we bought 4,000 units across 23 properties. I think it was roughly $300 million acquisition. And we went full cycle on 7 of them, which means we bought it, managed it, sold it. And then in 2020 decided through that time when I would get commissions, because I would get a base salary and then I would get commissions for different things. I just rolled all my commissions into deals that they were buying as a passive investor, because I basically set it up that my base salary covered my expenses and slightly more. And I was like, I just want to throw money into stuff. So that's part of how I was able to save up and then eventually leave. But started 2020, decided I wanted to buy something by myself. COVID hit. I thought it was going to be 2008 reincarnate. So I talked to some family, convinced them to loosely commit some cash to buying a deal. The downturn never really happened, but we found a deal in Orange Park that was 16 units. It was around the corner from a deal we had just bought for Toro over there. It was basically the same property, just smaller. It was like the same floor plans, same submarket, same business plan. So I was like, this is super easy for me, because going back to competitive advantage, I was like, we just did this 6 months ago. I just turn around and do it here. Put under contract, and then I hadn't intended to leave. I was still going to stay there, but had so many people kind of ask like, hey, are you leaving? What are you doing? What does this mean? And I was like, shit, maybe I should. So I decided to think about what I wanted and where I wanted to be and would this fit. And I decided that I was going to move down, go vertically integrated, so do property management, do construction management in-house. We were going to start there, and I built out like a whole 10-year business plan of like how to get to 500 million owned in 10 years, how much we were going to buy each year, roughly how much revenue, roughly how many employees, roughly expenses, roughly how much we were going to sell each year, and all that stuff. And it's never going to be 100% that, but at least it created a framework of like, where did I want to go? What do I want to achieve? Stuff like that. Part of the reason I chose that route of like not just buying deals for myself or whatever is when I invest in a deal and the deal performs, I get kickers essentially. There's basically like a profit sharing agreement. So as the deal performs better, I get more of a cut from what all the investors make. So because of that, in 5-7 years when we sell it, it's possible for me to turn like 50 grand into 250 grand. But I'm doing all this work in the meantime, and I don't really make a bunch of money while I do this. I get a little bit of money up front, but it basically gets rolled into the deal. Get a couple bucks to keep the lights on while we run the deal, and then hopefully it does well and I make a chunk of money. The plan is to build up a business that I can step into more of a CEO advisory role where I'm not in the weeds day to day, and I'm more just overseeing the direction of what we're doing and, investing in and, creating relationships. And, we're buying stuff that I can sleep easily at night because it doesn't have a ton of risk compared to a lot of other stuff.
Is your wife a camp? Like, is she a property manager?
No,
Or
she.
fiance, sorry.
Yeah, I call her my wife back in April. So I normally say wife, but then we were laughing about this the other day. I say wife 9 times out of 10, but then it almost always comes up that we're getting married in April, and I got to backtrack. So
Yeah.
I remember that.
Anyway, so she.
Like, does she stay there? Like, is somebody there? Is it like a normal apartment complex or you're
There's no offices or anything
Okay.
because they're too small,
Okay.
and we don't have anybody that lives on site.
Okay.
But she has a background in historic restoration and project
that's
management.
cool.
And because we have deals in Riverside,
Yeah.
she deals
That's
a lot
awesome.
with like the historical aspects. She helps oversee a lot of our construction work, and then also she's really good at like marketing and graphic design. So she does like, and I'm terrible at that stuff.
Did
Like,
she make this good?
no, I just picked a thing, and honestly, I hated it after I do it. So.
Why not? It looks fine. It's super
Yeah, so-
cool.
But anyway, yeah.
Okay,
So
one other random question.
Yeah.
Do your units have washer and dryers, or do you have a washer and dryer place or like
so
or none? But I know that's
one building. So our first deal in Orange Park. And this comes back to like the learning process. We rebuilt the laundry room and stuck common ones in, so there's none in the unit.
Okay.
I very badly wanted to put them in the unit. There was never really a good spot for them that didn't like eat up most of the closet or was just like in the middle of the living room.
Yeah, it's very European now to have like everything like your washer and dryers in your bathrooms or in your.
Yeah, so a lot of times it's just
Thank you. I was trying to think of
stuff built before like I think like the 80s or 90s didn't really have them.
Yeah. Or just the
So
washer
and
stuff.
sometimes one they're just not cheap to put in. They're like, so I'm doing it right now in one of them.
Putting them in each one.
Yeah.
Is
It's like probably the appliances are up $1,500 to $2,000. The plumbing and stuff is about $3,000. The electrical is probably $1,000. And then who knows if stuff goes wrong. So
you do it stacking those
just because there's a closet, I'd prefer to do full size, just because I think that's better. And then also if one part breaks, I don't have to replace the whole thing.
I was wondering about a stackable, how that would. Anyway, sorry.
It might be more possible to replace just one section of it, but one, I haven't owned buildings long enough with stackables to really see that, and two, I would imagine the manufacturers just want you to buy a whole new one, so they probably make it difficult. So
Is there a difference in insurance? If it's in a separate building versus in the house or anything like that?
I don't know. So the insurance world on commercial is super unclear because the insurance world is crazy right now. I never know what to budget. We just had a 25% increase on our insurance from last year to this year, which is insane. And they felt pretty good about that. They were like, "Oh, no, we'll do that." I was like, "Shut up."
They said that?
My brokers. But I have an insurance broker that I use. I don't place it myself. So yeah, not the carrier. Like, oh yeah, this is pretty good. It's only 25. Like,
Yeah,
but it's like a lot. There's like just so many factors that go into it. It's like how old is the building? When was stuff replaced? What construction is it? How close is it to water? And how much do carriers need business in Florida right now versus not need business? And it's like it's just it's all over the place. So I don't really know. I don't think it makes a huge difference. Like I don't think it's gonna like if I have it's not like it's gonna like move it from like $10,000 to $15,000.
Yeah.
But I don't know for sure.
Okay. Just wondering. Very cool.
You guys have any other questions or want me to go for anything?
What kind of other slides do you have?
Yeah, what else is on there?
We don't, whatever you feel is.
Yeah, so here, I'll give you a brief overview. Yield on cost is basically like why I like it is because it's basically saying like if I can take the 6,000 NOI in the future and increase it to 9,000. So like this is a 6 cap, right? 6 divided by 100.
Mhm.
If you get it up to 9K, That's now a 9% yield on cost, right? It's saying what is my future return going to be, and that takes out subjectiveness from like the broker or the seller. It's using my income projections, my expense projections, my cost in the deal, right? Because if you buy something for 100 and to get income up, you probably got to spend money to renovate. You got closing costs, so really 100 is probably 110 or something like that.
Yeah.
Which then it's not really 9; it's probably like 8.5. But I feel better about that because the way you make profit is the spread between what you're operating at versus what you sell it at. So this is also your break-even point. So like if I took 9,000 divided by 9%, it would give me 100 grand. So I would make back what I bought it for. But if I sold it for like a 5 cap, well, I'm going to make the difference between the two. Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah.
Let's say it was 10 for easy math, because that, again, round numbers help. So we took, as your NOI. So that's income after expenses. You go from 6,000 to 10,000, right? And for easy math, let's say our total cost was 100 grand. So now we're at a 10% cap rate. Our break even is also this 10%.
Right. Okay.
If you sell it for your exit cap or your sale cap of 5% on 10,000 would be 200K. If it was and as this number gets closer to your yield on cost, the less money you're going to make. So here, I actually put it on the slide. So here, this breaks it down more. So like when you have your current NOI of 50 grand, you buy it for $1 million, closing cost of 100, that's high, but just round number, 200. So your total cost is 1.3. So like your cap rate is 5%, but your going in return on your total purchase, your cost is 3.85. But if you can bring your NOI from 50 to 100, well now 100 divided by 1.3 is 7.7. So that's why, like in multifamily, something called value add, where basically what you're doing is like, let's say you were going to buy a turnkey property and the market is like 6%. I will buy something at a lower than market for something that I can improve at a 5 or a cost of 3.85 because I can improve it and get above that 6 in the future. So I can spend money, time, and energy to get a higher than market return by doing all that stuff than what I could do by just buying a turnkey property. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Now, part of that would be somewhat consciously knowing where that market is going to be by the time you've concluded that work, right? Right.
You have no clue. You can try, but like I just said, I budgeted a 2.5% insurance
Oh, I
increase,
did. Yeah.
and it went up 25%. So like, you do what you can, but like also,
You can't help
it was 25%, but also our rent growth
it.
went up like crazy too. So it's like, you hope it balances out and like you try to be as conservative as you can. But like, that's why I like yield on cost, because I say, okay, here's that difference between the two. Of like, as you go to, 5 cap is 2 million. On that previous example, where you take it to 100,000, 5 cap would be 2 million. As you get closer to that, you get closer to your break-even point.
Yeah.
The higher I can get that yield on cost, the less risk it is because my break-even is better. So it's like, that's why I feel good about it. But again, you never know what's going to really happen. So it's like, it's also, I said bullshit just to keep it the same. But
Let's put it. Yeah.
But I like it slightly more, but it's just one metric or one tool that you're
Of course.
That's kind of what I was talking about, so you can read that later. Just some other metrics to know.
So, want to interrupt you because
You're
I'm
good.
sure everybody has
Yeah,
similar to be, because we're like past our time.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
We're gonna have to bring you back in, Chris. So if you want to run through the rest of your slide real quick to overview it. And then,
Well, this, I would say, I'll send this out and you guys can just read that because that's just easy stuff. Yeah, that you just read through. If you have questions, because my email's on here, so just email me. And that was really it. So now I was just going to talk about how to underwrite and stuff.
oh yes,
Yes.
yeah.
We kind of went off the rails a little bit.
We
but,
did. Well, this might confuse some of us.
I mean, so it's tough to tell you how to underwrite because your underwriting is only as good as the numbers you use. So like, if you know nothing, you're just throwing mud against the wall, hoping something sticks. So like, if you were like, hey, I want to go buy a property, you got to go do rent surveys to see what it could rent for, and then you got to go figure out what your expenses would be. Taxes, you can figure out online, go look at the appraiser website. Insurance, talk to an insurance person. And then everything else, if you're going to hire a property manager, they should be able to tell you what typical expenses are for something like this. And if they can't, go find another manager.
Yeah.
And then I would also, ask to see if they can send you, financials from a similar type of deal so you can see if it's actually working. And then I would talk to a couple and see if there's a big variance. When you start getting into the multifamily stuff, you can start looking at financials that people send you and start getting an idea for what market expenses are. But it's kind of bullshit. So, because every deal is different, right? You run into problems or people run their financials differently, and it's like, so I'm going to do it more from like a basic standpoint, and I'm not going to use like actual expense numbers. I'm going to use an expense ratio, which is just a percentage of income, just to go through how it would work. But like the details of like what's my income and expenses actually going to be, I can't tell you. You're going to have to go do some actual work to figure it out. If you just want to be quick and dirty about it, you're like, I don't really care. I just will work over 10 years. Just use like 50% for expenses without the mortgage, and you'll probably be safe in today's market. It's a little bit lower, but it's not bad. So, I'm trying to make this one. Let's say we're looking at the T12. Income is 12,000. So 1,000, one house, $1,000 a month. Expenses are 6,000. That gives you an NOI of 6,000. So it can either go one of two ways. They either give you the purchase price, you run what the cap rate is, or you figure it out. For easy math, again, we'll use 5% just to figure it out. If anybody wants to know how to quickly do 5%, I always do 10% and then half it. So 10% would be 60,000. So double that would be 120. Then what's going to happen is, so let's say we're buying it for 120. That's purchase price. Then we're going to have closing costs. So I'll just do CC. Let's say that's, I don't know, 10 grand. You got to figure out what that is for you. Let's say you're going to do renovation of 20 grand. And you're going to have a reserve, just like to have some money in the bank, of 5 grand. And I'm making this up on the spot, so if I change numbers after the fact, bear with me. So that would be 130, 150, 155 is our cost. Let's say we get a 70% loan. This would be to figure out what you can get in a loan. Go have a mortgage broker, ask them to look at the deal. They'll kind of tell you and size it up. But 70 is probably not too crazy. So that'd be a loan of 84,000. Equity of 71,000. Another metric to look at is loan to cost. So everyone knows LTV. That's purchase. Cost is just to that. So that puts you at 54%. So now what we would look at with the deal is where do we think we can take income, where do we think we can take expenses, stuff like that. And for ease of use, and we're gonna look at it over a multi-year thing. Income, expenses, and all that. Let's say we think we can get up to, we're spending 20 grand to renovate, so we probably want to see a decent pop in rent. So let's say it went from 1,000 to 1,250. So that would be 15,000. And then let's say we think income's going to go up 3%. So times 1.3, that would be 15,450. Then we take that number times 1.3, which would be 15913.50 cents. Everyone follow that so far. Expenses, let's say we think taxes are going to go up and insurance is going to go up slightly. We'll use, let's just say 7 grand. So it's not anything too big. $8,000, I think I can do that. Let's say 7,000 times 1.3, 7,210. 7, 4, sorry, 2, 6, 3, 0. Subtract.
Those expenses you're using, it's the same percentage every year that you've used? Just with
No, so that's an important thing to look at. So if you take 15,000 at 3%, went up $450. 3% for 7,000 only went up 210. So because it's going up the same percentage, but they're larger dollar amounts, you actually pick up $240. Okay. Whether that actually happens, who knows? But that's the stuff that you might do.
Yeah.
So in theory, with normal inflation and whatever, on paper, you should pick up extra money every year because you're increasing the same percentage on different amounts.
Yeah, right. Now, in real world, do you find that your expenses are about the same year over year? Like tax aside, in terms of?
It's all over the place because it's so tough to measure because when you do this, the big thing for underwriting, you're going to put numbers on paper, and then when you take over, you're going to throw it out the window. Because what you think is going to happen is not going to happen. If I bought this deal, my expenses are never going to be $7,210 on the nose. My income's never going to be $15,450 on the nose. What I hope is that when I break out my income and expenses, right? So, right here's all my income. You got 10 different potential things. Expenses, you've got 15 different potential things. I hope I have more wins than losses, meaning my income's more than I projected, and my expenses are lower than I projected. You're going to be wrong on every single one, no matter what, unless you buy a house and you're like, I'm going to keep rent the same and you have no vacancy. Then you might hit it, right?
Yeah.
But by and large, you're going to be wrong. So you just hope that you were conservative enough and the deal still made sense that your net number is higher than what you projected. And that might be your income's higher and your expenses were the same. Might be your income was lower and your expenses were way lower. Who knows?
Yeah.
But basically, you're going to go on paper. You're going to run rent surveys. When you are doing renovations, you say, okay, if I put in new cabinets, new countertops, new floors. Here's what I think it's worth. The same way you would kind of look at like a house value. You're just doing the same thing. You're looking for similar houses. You're looking for similar properties close by that look similar, similar size, and then you're going to renovate to a similar standard, and you hope you're right. Expenses, you hope you get good information. You hope things stay the same, and you hope you're right or better. Our loan was $84,000. Let's say our loan was, what did we do? 5. Let's say for argument's sake it was 5%, but interest only, so no amortizing, just because that's easier for me to calculate. So 84 times 0.05 would be 4,200 per year. So we take 4,200. Doesn't change, or it shouldn't. For 3,800. 4,040. 4,287. So that would be 300 divided by our equity, 71,000. 5.35%. I know my handwriting sucks. I apologize.
Up all of it.
5.7%. 0.70. Basically 6%. So that would be kind of how you break out the income and expenses and look at it. And then eventually when you're going to sell, let's say you think it's also worth 5 cap, you would take 4,287.2 divided by 0.05. It's not right, I'm sorry. Use the NOI, sorry. Use this number.
84. Yeah.
Jesus, that's wrong.
Hang on a little while.
Would be 169,744 minus 155, 123, 14,744 profit on sale.
Yeah, over 3 years.
Over 3 years. So yeah. So what you're going to look at is both not only the cash flow, but then there's something called, and it's in there where I explain it more, it's called an annualized return. So if you were going to sell this in 3 years, you'd add up all of the money you'd make every year, plus the profit, divide it by the number of years, and then divide it by your equity to see how much you make per year in the whole thing. So plus 3,800, plus 40, plus 42, 7 by 2. So the total cash flow is 26,871.2 is the profit plus total cash flow divided by our equity up here, 71,000. So that's a 37.8% total return. So that's for the full 3 years, and then divided by 3 is 12.6% per year. Do you guys have questions on that? No, it doesn't double.
No.
So it's 37% total.
Okay.
So you would be turning
So funny.
71,000. You would get that back.
No,
Plus 26, so you'd be getting back like $98,000.
Like right after he eats, it's just like, oh.
Me, I probably wouldn't do this.
Yeah.
It's thank
It's not,
you.
Honestly,
Makes sense.
For feeding it. Just appreciate it.
and I'm just
But this is just
taking
giving
on,
us a.
yeah, this is just how you do it, right?
Yeah, sure.
You know, if your expenses were, you know, let's say you think you can keep expenses even because they're overpaying for landscaping or something. So taxes go up, but landscaping goes down. You pick up $1,000 a year. You know, so that's an extra $3,000 plus $1,000 divided by a 5 cap is an extra $20,000 in sale profits.